Oh, Entrepreneurs Channel TV. Rewriting Africa's story through enterprise Amazons. We promote women in business. We showcase women in business.
Entrepreneurs Channel TV, creating a platform of expression for every woman.
My name is Ayo Ogunsola, and I am Depth for Climate Nigeria Coordinator. We are here at the World Social Forum. So, what is Depth for Climate? Depth for Climate is a movement of movements, and we look at the intersection of how depth and the climate crisis affects global South countries. Um, Many countries in the global south, and specifically in Africa, have to borrow money to adapt to the impacts of climate change. Um, there are countries, for example, who have to slash their health budgets, their education budgets, to be able to adapt to the impact of climate crisis. For example, flooding in Lagos, Nigeria, or flooding in Longe, Malawi, um, would affect schools, healthcare centers, administrative buildings, and this will cost the government a huge amount of money. Now, the question is African countries already have a lot of problems. So, where do they get this money from? They then have to go to global institutions, they have to go to governments, they have to go to places where um, they don't necessarily like them, and they borrow money from them because they have to make sure that education is provided for the kids. They have to make sure that healthcare system is available for women, and so they borrow money from there. And these global institutions that, in quotes, are meant to support, organizations, support global South countries, put very harsh conditionalities on these countries. Sometimes it leads to situation where they take their lands, they extract their resources, and this creates a situation where African countries or global South countries in general cannot develop because they have to pay for high interest loans. They have to sometimes battle between picking um, education and figuring out extreme ways of how they are going to adapt to the climate crisis. So as a movement, Debt for Climate, we demand unconditional cancellation of debts. And this may look very ambiguous, but it has happened before. For Germany after the Second World War, debt cancellation has been a theme, and it's not something that is strange. So, as a movement, we demand debt cancellation for global South countries because they are not responsible for the climate crisis. Africa, for example, emits less than 4% of global emissions, and you see that if you look very closely, you see that most global South countries have to depend on, let's say, extracting resources. They have to, if they have oil, they have to extract oil. If they have gold, they have to, take out, mine gold, just to be able to make sure that their economies are balanced. But now it's becoming a situation where these institutions, which African countries, most of them, say for example the IMF, um, they were not involved in the creation of some of these institutions, and so it's not for them. These institutions were not created for them. They were created to be able to extract resources from these African countries, from these global South countries. And as a movement, we are looking at ways that we can demand for debt cancellation, that we can even audit some of these debts to be able to demand accountability on both ends. And this is our core message as a movement. Um, as therefore Climate Nigeria coordinator, we've carried out several workshops to educate young people to use the advocacy strategies, utilize social media to communicate this with the the people that they can reach. We have figured out ways to mobilize around the world to, organize ourselves and make sure that this messaging is put intact and clearly to the government, so that this situation of injustice, which it is really, this situation of injustice is, we find a solution to it. And here we are at the World Social Forum again. We have traveled from Guinea, we have gone to Ivory Coast, to Ghana, to Togo, and now we're in Benin again to work with different movements, organizations. We've spoken to community members, women, farmers, and some of these situations we are seeing again where there's an intersection between mining, there's an intersection between extraction of resources, land grabbing, and all of this still ties into some very harsh conditionalities that their governments have to take. So at the end of the day, the debt crisis is very, very strong and affects even the grassroots, because now the government takes very harsh policies, and sometimes, the community people are the ones who are affected. Makes things expensive. Women have to trek now because they cannot get to, um, transport systems, because they don't have the money to do that. They have to like pay times five, for example, to be able to have access to sanitary pads. Education is, more expensive for their children. For them to get seats gets more expensive. And at the end of the day, those who are most affected are the ones who face the brunt of this. And all we are asking for as a movement is total debt cancellation that at the end of the day gets down to support community people. Thank you.